Welcome back to the Sioux City Show. My name is Taylor Grote. I'm hosting this thing. In the studio with me today, I have Dave Bernstein, the founder, the originator, co-founder of Saturday in the Park. And with Saturday in the Park coming up so soon, I wanted to have a chance to talk to you about like the history of the event, what people can expect this year, and I guess the general stuff that goes into planning such a big event for Sioux City. So when did it start?
We started in 1991, so this will be our 29th year.
Okay.
And just kind of right out of college, and had come back to Sioux City, and started with Adam Figus and a guy named Tom Gruskin as well. We were somewhat bored, and so we decided to start a music festival, and we were only doing it one time.
Nice. And now 29 it's 29 years later. Yeah. So, and it has happened for every year for 29 years?
Yeah.
Nice.
In fact, one year it happened twice. It was a 2-day.
Wow.
Once.
And you
the third year
we did
it. Yeah, we did it 2 days on the third year, and it was a lot of work. It was a lot more work.
Yeah, I'd imagine. So what was the original plan for the festival? Did you guys have like a certain music style you wanted to bring in? Because it's pretty eclectic now.
Yeah, the plan was always eclectic. I don't know that the plan was any different than what it is today. We were always clued into like blues and rock, reggae, that whole mix. Not so much jazz, but it stemmed from a festival that I worked on in college called Armadillo Day at Northwestern. I worked on for a couple years, and that was always like reggae and blues and rock headliners. The big year that I was the chair of that, we had Third World was one of the headliners, and a guy named Adrian Belew. I think we had Buddy Guy or Albert Collins, one of the Chicago blues staple legends, played the night before. Actually, Jerry Seinfeld was the comedian.
Wow.
On the Thursday night. I mean, Jerry, it was pre Seinfeld,
pre blow up. Yeah.
Pre TV show. So it sort of came from that music that we listened to. And ultimately, the first year that we started Saturday in the Park in 91, I also attended the New Orleans Jazz and Heritage Festival, and it really aligned well with what those guys were doing also there. So I was pretty motivated and moved by what they were doing. And I tell agents all the time when they're like pitching us different things, I say, listen, if it works at Jazz and Heritage Festival in New Orleans, it's probably workable for us.
Yep.
And it's a good way to describe it.
Oh, awesome. Nice. So what concert, I guess, like out of every year, what's the one act that like really stands out to you as your favorite?
So for me, I think my favorite headliner was the Avett Brothers. The year that we had the Avets, it was Bonnie Raitt and the Avets were the two closers. And the Avets were just really on fire on their way up. And a lot of people went. I think a certain chunk of people went because they were fans of Bonnie, and then they stayed because it's pretty compatible. And then people knew the Avets or knew of the Avets. And I think a lot of folks told me later that they'd never even heard of the Avets before, but they loved that show. And I was familiar with them, but I just thought really that they kind of took it to a different level.
Yeah, they're an example of one of those acts that's just such great musicians that even people who aren't really fans of their music still are like, Jesus, this band's killing it.
Yeah, they're great. And they're one of those bands as well, like you listen to the recorded stuff and it's a little on the mellow side, but when you put them on, when they go on stage and they up-tempo it a bit, it's a whole different beast. Not unlike, I was just having a conversation with someone yesterday about Michigan Rattlers, who, if you listen to their stuff, they're playing this year, midday on Spotify. Some of it's on the mellower side, some of it's pretty up tempo, but when you see them live, they're a much they're a pretty active band.
Awesome. So who are you most excited about this year?
This year's all over the map, pretty much. I don't know if there's anyone I'm most excited about. I mean, for me, I found that some of the people I get hyped up for in advance maybe aren't as great as some of the people that I wasn't expecting. So I kind of try and keep that expectation open. That's a great thing about Saturday in the Park, is because it's free. You don't have to worry about, like, I bought my ticket to go to this show instead of that show. I have become a big fan of Michigan Rattlers, so I'm looking forward to those guys. They're playing, pretty early, like 2:30 on Saturday. Brio was great on the Abe stage a few years ago, so I think they're really going to do well on the main stage. I think Liz Phair is going to bring a lot of people out, maybe more than we anticipated when we booked her. I think George will bring a lot of people out, and of course Flo Rida is going to bring a lot of people out. Matisyahu as well. There's a lot of hype and talk about Matisyahu headlining the Abe.
The second stage, or the Abe stage, has really been doing a great job the last few years.
Yeah, those guys are awesome.
Absolutely. I like the thing that every year, since it is a free festival, even if the headliner isn't somebody you might buy a ticket to, you can count on like 6-7 hours of solid music leading up to that headliner. And even if you haven't heard of the band, there's going to be somebody you like in there. Gogol Bordello really sticks out to me as one that I was like kind of shocked by. I had I think I was just there passing time until the next act.
Right.
They're pretty crazy.
That was one of my target bands. Sometimes I just get bands in my mind that I've seen. I saw Gogol Bordello twice. Prior to that, and the first time I saw them, I don't know how, somehow I ended up with a DVD of theirs. Wow. I think, and went to see them at Concord Hall, which was a hall in Chicago that holds about 1,000 people on the second floor of a building, and they opened it, and it was a train wreck in there. I mean, it was hot and sweaty, and the whole floor was just moving, and I was a little concerned the place was going to collapse, but it was an amazing show. And then we went to see them as well later on in Vegas at the Cosmopolitan. They played when they used to do that pool venue that they had where they would drain the water out of the pool at
crazy.
5 o'clock. They had this system where it would just suck all the water out of the pool and then into a tank, and then they put it back the next day.
I was just at the Cosmopolitan yesterday.
Yeah, it's cool. And they set up a stage, and it was funny because we were out there to see Gogol Bordello, and ended up getting like a room with a balcony, and we were like out just drinking beers on the balcony. I'd been connected through someone else I knew to get a room that was facing the stage, and we were like 10 stories up on this balcony watching for Gogol Bordello on Saturday, and Friday was Panic at the Disco, who I'd been a fan of probably 5, 6, 7, 8 years earlier, and this was already darn near 10 years ago, 8 years ago now, maybe, whatever it was. And,
I think it would have to be 10 years ago, because I don't think Panic at the Disco has been officially banned since like 2011, 2012, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, he's been out doing stuff.
Brandon Urie has a great solo career now. I think he might.
Well, no, he's out under Panic at the Disco.
Oh, is he?
Yeah, he's back out, and
okay.
So it's funny because they're just that.
You're right.
He under that name is massive now. But it was funny because they played Friday, so we watched that show, unexpected, and then Gogol Bordello, which was great, and brought them here, and they were nuts. Those guys were nuts, drinking vodka out of. They were pouring vodka through loaves of bread and drinking it backstage, and.
I don't know if I got the liver to be a rock star, so I'm glad I picked this lane. I didn't have that one in me. Liver through a bread.
Those guys hit it hard. Yeah. They were great. They were great.
So do you have like a wish list of bands that like do you have seen that would be insane to get, or
not it's all pretty obvious, I think. Okay. I don't know that I do at this point. So much of it for us at this point isn't so much who we'd want to get or who we think is good, but who's possible both financially and who's possible routing wise. Okay. And that was a challenge for us this year was routing wise, there were so many bands that could have done it, wanted to do it, could have worked, but ended up taking that weekend off or going to Europe, or we're just coming back from Europe, a multitude of different things.
4th of July weekend can be a little tricky.
It's tricky, and I think in the end, after next year, we're going to have to move weekends. It's just too hard. If you look, you can see a bunch of tour schedules if you go to Polestar or somewhere like that, where you'll see people playing up till, the 29th, 30th, this coming weekend, and then they're off until like the 11th, 10th, 11th, 12th, and they're just off.
I feel like that it's also like when acts can book their biggest venues, because that's when the most people I feel like have free time to go to a concert. So I'd imagine that like a lot of people are doing like that one Vegas show or something when they're slipping it in, or
some of it is that, some of it is that you don't sell a lot of tickets on holiday weekends in the US. If you look at it and say, okay, I'm going to go play a random venue and say you're going to go play the Tyson Center in Sioux City, and it's a holiday weekend, you're either not going to be in town, or instead of buying 2 tickets, you're going to buy 6 tickets because you got a bunch of relatives or friends or family or something.
True.
So you're always marketing to a subset of people who potentially can attend on those holiday weekends. So you see a lot of artists either take it off or go to Europe, because Europe is a hotbed right now. I mean, there are a ton of artists in Europe or heading to Europe right now.
That's crazy.
And touring. And it's always been that way. We struggled for many, many years to get B.B. King because B.B. King always went to Europe in July. And so the one year that we were lucky enough to be able to book him, it was on June 30th, was the festival. And he went to Europe like the next day.
Wow.
So we just got lucky. We were able to convert a messed up show that we inadvertently booked on election night, which was a mistake. and then had to postpone into that June 30th Saturday in the Park, which really did work out well.
Yeah,
on so many fronts. I mean, we were going to take a bath on that show,
and I feel like BB King is one of like the all stars. Like if you're selling somebody on the idea of coming to Saturday in the Park, if they're not from here or whatever, you can be like BB King came here, or like Aretha Franklin was. Yeah, some like bucket list legend names have really come through.
He was one of the bigger ones that we had. I was surprised because there just wasn't that much chatter about BB beforehand. I even commented to one of the other folks I work with on the festival. I was like, man, I'm not hearing much vibe, but it was just because everyone came out, wanted to see him. And I mean, kids up to, people in their 90s. And,
that's awesome.
It was nuts. The other ones we get a lot of traction on when we mention them in kind of our pitch, Santana, of course, being a big band that's always sold a lot of tickets, Allman Brothers Band, Avett Brothers, folks like that, sell a decent amount of tickets on a regular basis. So that really sets the tone pretty well.
So how has the turnout been over the years? Has it always been like, now I know it is 25,000, 30,000 people show up to it?
We'll call it 20, 25,000 throughout the day, realistically. And it's ebbed and flowed around then. There's been some years that have been bigger than other years. Certainly, I can kind of tell mid to late afternoon when I see the road that kind of wraps around, the food vendors are on one side of it, and then it's kind of the road that divides the beer garden from, when there's people starting to accumulate on that road to watch the show. It's a pretty big year.
And weather, it's been a long time since there was like bad weather for one, hasn't it?
Yeah.
I'm not even. We've
been lucky. We've really, luckily, not been impacted tremendously by weather. The worst year for impact for us, and it wasn't really a bad year, was the year we had the Wallflowers in Michelle Branch.
Okay.
And the Wallflowers closed, and it rained pretty steadily from probably about halfway through Michelle's set through the end of the Wallflowers. It was like a nice light summer rain, not windy, and it was hot out. So basically what we saw happen was the people that were there stayed, but it kept a lot of people out. Like I know a couple people who said, we saw the forecast and it was going to rain, or it was raining, so we didn't come out.
That's a bummer.
We've had other years. The year we had Santana the second time, which I think was, I can't remember when that was, maybe 9 years ago now. And Steve Winwood, there were some storms coming in, and it rained super hard in Sergeant Bluff.
Oh,
super. I mean, it might have been like an inch of rain in Sergeant Bluff, and we did not get one drop.
Didn't get touched at Grandview. That's crazy. And that's 10 miles in between the two?
Yeah. Yeah. And we've had a couple years where it's rained afterwards. The year we had Dr. John, which would have been the third year, he was playing, and right towards the end of his set, it started to rain.
Okay.
And, so people started trickling out, and he finished his set pretty much on time. And then we tore down in the rain. And I think the year of the Neville Brothers, it rained pretty hard after their set. And I think we tore down a lot of stuff in the rain. I remember one year loading a truck that was at the end of the road. The road up to the back of the band shell used to be really bad before the city fixed it up. And we couldn't really get semis all the way up, especially when it was rainy and no visibility. And so we pushed cases.
Yeah.
In an inch of water all the way down the road and into the trucks, and everything was soaked, and it was crazy. So
those are, it is pretty crazy to have a 29-year festival where you can, especially in Iowa summer, where you can only point out like a couple of times where the weather was really gnarly. I had a t-shirt company that we had a booth at Saturday in the Park when we were in college the year that Sublime with Rome was it. And I want to say it was like 105 degrees the whole day. I've never been more sure I was going to die sitting in that tent on that concrete the whole day selling t-shirts, but Sublime was a nice payoff at the end.
Yeah. It was hot. They dropped their share of F-bombs, which caused me a little bit of heartburn afterwards, but they were good. They were good. That was fun.
I think my personal highlight so far from Saturday in the Park has been, was it CeeLo Green got on the stage? Yeah. And he gets on, I think his first line was like there's some lovely women in the crowd tonight. Which one of y'all are going to show me some titties? Yeah. And then you hear from off the stage, this is a kid show.
Yeah.
Sorry, kids.
He was good. He had that song, and he never swore during, he just held the mic out, and 20,000 people did it for him. And it was great. Yeah. We caught a little bit of flack for that. The biggest thing we caught flack for, and I ended up apologizing 2 years in a row for kind of the unintended consequences of what happened on stage, once for Sublime and the year before with CeeLo. The year of CeeLo, the bigger issue, I think, the bigger objection was the content that he had on the video screens. When he threw up the video of women eating bananas, that I think that caused some heartburn, and the guy who was the mayor at the time decided to vent at the city council meeting, and we listen, we don't want to offend anybody, so we apologize. The Sublime with Rome thing was a little more bothersome for me, just because it was somewhat gratuitous. I mean, there was just like a constant thread of
kind of playing
the
to a different crowd.
F-bomb. And it just didn't add anything. You know what I'm saying? It just was really unnecessary. I mean, listen, some lyrics have, profanity in them, and that's, dramatically.
If it adds something, it's fine.
Yeah, if it adds something, or if it's part of the dramatic or creative liberty of the writer, so be it, right?
Yeah.
I mean, there's lots of books that have profanity, et cetera, et cetera. But when it's just kind of like every third word's the F-bomb, it's at some point it gets kind of tedious.
At film school, we called it boobs without context. Like when you just throw nudity in the scene because you can, and it doesn't add anything. Yeah,
totally.
That's funny.
The CeeLo video was creative, and it kind of went with the song. There was a point to it, so it wasn't out of left field. It wasn't boobs without context, but the Sublime thing was boobs without context. It was just there was just nothing added.
Yeah,
and it was a little tone deaf to the crowd. I thought
as
bet. Well, because they did not close. I don't believe.
Yeah, that's right. I think that they were. I want to say they were like in the heat of the day. Too.
Yeah, so it didn't take much to look out and realize there were a lot of kids,
children.
Yeah, or teenagers and stuff.
And I feel like in Sioux City, whether it be for Saturday in the Park or the Battery Park concert series, the citizens of this town take it very seriously if you book a band that is not country or hard rock. It takes some talk. It takes some convincing. And I'm not saying that the average person. I'm saying that the people who post on Facebook apparently are huge fans of nothing but country or hard rock because it seems to cause an uproar whenever.
Yeah, what we've seen generally, and part of it's the expectation setting of free. Clearly gets people to show up with different expectations. We've seen good feedback. I think sometimes what we see is disappointment because there's so many genres and we bounce around that I think people like get all psyched for, everyone's got their own preferences, right? So clearly country's big and hot country is big. You take the latest and greatest country artist, like Kane Brown, who's just at the casino, and he's huge right now. And so there's going to be more people that like him. Spotify might yield similar results to that than there might be for Jason Isbell last year. And so we do see people, they get vocal because I think they're disappointed. They're just like hoping maybe they love the Avids, and then all of a sudden we come back the next year with something completely different, and then they're disappointed. On the backside of that, it's good when you do hit some, Thorogood this year's really classic rock. And there's people pretty pumped, and there's some people I think that would have been bummed if that would have been it, but then you also got Flo Rida, which is not classic rock. Clearly, heavy pop. I mean, a lot of people are like rap. I'm like, I think of like straight rap as something different. I mean, this is like R&B hip hop. And
he was kind of doing party anthems for like 3 years in the early 2010s there.
And he's got tons of them. And if you look at like My House on Spotify, I mean, that thing is pushing 600 million. Track, spins. And that is a huge number. That song on Spotify has been listened to 600 million times.
It's insane. That's hard to wrap your mind around that number.
There's thousands and thousands of people in Siouxland that have been listening to that song on Spotify.
Absolutely.
As part of that 600 million. And that number just keeps climbing. I mean, I'm sure it's just below 600 million right now. I'm sure by the time Saturday in the Park rolls around, it'll break that.
Okay.
And those are big numbers. So, we look at some of that stuff more now. You didn't have that metric before. But certainly you can go, and there were a couple other people. We were getting down to the wire there, and Flo Rida, and there's a couple other options. And, I will tell you that Spotify in part played into that. To say, like, there's guys got a lot of fans. Clearly.
So
or one person who's listening to that song continuously.
I hope not. I hope nobody's done that to themselves. But like in terms of adding Spotify counts into the list of considerations that you go through, I consider bands like Avett Brothers or Isbell or like a Sturgill Simpson type character, somebody who's like maybe not in the pop mainstream of what the average music listener is going to listen to, but are absolute killers and phenomenal performers. What when you're looking at who gets to headline and what all that, like what goes into considerations of making that decision? Maybe?
So it's a pretty convoluted mess, to be honest with you, of who's available, who's affordable, who we like. We've really stayed away from, our biggest thing is who's good live. I would say from that perspective, I love Gnarls Barkley, and I liked what CeeLo was doing at the time. But in hindsight, we don't do track dates. So CeeLo showed up basically and sang to a track, which is pretty common with a lot of pop stuff.
It's a nightmare.
Flo Rida was definitely highly vetted out before we offered on and confirmed Flo Rida, was that Flo Rida plays with a full band and does a great job of it. And our production manager, who happens to be my brother, has worked with them in the last couple months, and others I know have as well. And so if it wouldn't have been for the full band and everything, no matter how big someone is, I don't think we would have done that again. That's one of the criteria, is they got to be great live. That being said, we do kind of have a bent towards the Neighbor Brothers being a good example of saying, here's a band who's getting pretty big, pretty popular, got a lot of material, great group, and maybe not commercially as viable in Sioux City as other places, but Saturday in the Park's free, so here's an opportunity to be able to present them to a large group of people. And I think that really that was the culmination of like the ideal scenario for us.
Yeah. I think that I worked for the concert production company for the University of Iowa. It's called
Scope.
Scope. Yeah. And we had like a few shows like that as well, where I think like Janelle Monáe, we had trouble pushing tickets to. This is one of the most phenomenal musicians out right now. And even like the Black Keys wasn't a huge draw when we got them. Early Black Keys.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, I saw the Black Keys not that long ago. I'd say maybe within the last decade at Sokol in the basement.
Yep.
I mean, that was 300-400 people, and just the two of them. It wasn't.
That's crazy.
5 of them.
Yeah.
Janelle, I've seen a few times, and she's another great example. We have offered on Janelle a few times. Janelle only does so many dates. Now she's got this huge acting career.
Yeah.
So that's made it more complicated, but Janelle's great live.
I want to say that
she's
she
crazy
was
live.
By far she stands out as the nicest performer tenfold than the next nicest performer.
Oh yeah.
She walked around after her show and thanked every single person that was on like the student committee cleaning up after the show. I'm like,
that's cool.
I appreciate that. Yeah. I went to, we had Fun, that band, We Are Young.
Of course.
We had them, and it was like right when We Are Young had come out, and it wasn't on the radio like it became eventually. And we had them do a live show in the auditorium of the the lounge of the IMU before their actual show. And I want to say like 5 people came to it because like nobody knew who Fun was at the time.
And they blew up.
Yeah. And then like it was a matter of weeks later where they were like the biggest band in the U.S. because they were on like 4 commercials simultaneously. So
yeah, it's funny. We had Nate Russ over at the Orpheum here a few years ago. And, it was a great show. And it was a good chunk of the Fun catalog along with some of his solo stuff. It was a really great show. It was hard to make that jump. From Fun to Nate, and Nate, of course, being the voice of that band. So it was a little frustrating. And they were sort of, his folks were, you had to kind of be careful on how you tried to bill that.
They didn't want any.
Yeah, sometimes they get these ideas that they don't really want to bring that up so much.
Want a clean break from the old band.
Yeah, but that's kind of the stuff that got you there. So
it's like when Vanilla Ice used to freak out when people told him to play Ice Ice Baby. It's like, what are you here for, guy? Exactly. You're here for one song. Play it 20 times.
At some point, you're looking for the hits. At least some of the hits. You don't have to have all the hits, but certainly some of them. And there's very few performers that can get by not playing the big songs. I saw Clapton once, quite a while ago now, do a blues tour. And all he played was the blues. And he did throw in like White Room. A blues version of it, but it was really just blues classics. And I remember sitting through that show about a third of the way in, and I'm like, man, he is about the only guy that could do this.
Yeah.
There might be a couple, like Neil Young could come in and do something like that, and some of those guys are just so good that you walk out of Clapton playing all blues and say, man, that was amazing. But most performers, you want to hear at least some of it. That's always the frustration with Mark Knopfler, who's a great one. Mark puts on a great live show. And if it wasn't for Dire Straits, it would be an amazing show, except for the fact that you can't forget that he's with Dire Straits. So he throws in like 2 Dire Straits songs, and it's great. And then he plays a Dire Straits song, and you're like, oh man, I want more Dire Straits songs now, and you can't get over that.
I bet.
And
I feel like somebody needs to have like arguably the greatest blank ever in their repertoire to like really be able to sell just a live show completely divorced from their big band, like Clapton, arguably the greatest guitar player ever.
Yeah.
So.
And Mark Knopfler could probably do it if he didn't throw in the couple of Dire Straits songs, but the minute you hear, Tunnel of Love, I mean, then you're just like, ugh.
Yeah.
I just want to hear his whole show with that stuff.
Yeah. I could hear Prince play whatever the hell he wants to play for an hour, but if he doesn't throw in Purple Rain at the end, I'm going to be left wanting more. So.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So
I saw Prince at one point, and he did like about half the set was a DJ set that he did, and it was,
I don't know if I wanted
it was interesting, but it wasn't great.
Yeah. That's a bummer because
Luckily, I saw him one more time after that because otherwise that would have been stuck in my mind.
Was the second one better?
The second one was off the hook amazing.
Okay.
I saw him at he played George Lucas's wedding reception in Chicago.
Okay.
George Lucas got married somewhere else, like in San Francisco, and then they had a party in Chicago. And he announced at noon on a Saturday that he was playing City Winery at 2 a.m. 10 hours, 12 hours later, 14 hours later. And City Winery holds 300 people.
Wow.
And my friend Beth got us 4 tickets. And so we went and started waiting in line at 1 a.m. and finally got in about 2:30. And he went on at 3 a.m. and played the wedding set with an 18-piece band. And it was hit after hit after hit after hit until 5:30 in the morning. And it was the weekend before Saturday in the Park. It was this coming weekend.
Really?
And I remember going outside and the sun was coming up and thinking, man, only that couldn't have worked out any better. So.
That's if I like was sitting here today and Prince was alive obviously and he like tweeted out like in 12 hours I'll be playing this show in Chicago and I was able to get tickets, I would be driving to Chicago this afternoon.
Absolutely.
Yeah, if those flights were all booked up, which they usually are.
It was amazing.
Yeah. That's crazy. So booking shows, where did right after college, where did that passion come from? I know that you saw other shows, but it's a big leap to like concerts and then going to throw in your own festival.
It actually happened in college. Well, going back even before college, I used to DJ in high school, and it was a different kind of DJing, but I used to DJ a lot of stuff at North High. I got kind of into the role where for a couple of years I was doing a dance up there every other weekend nice. For the football team or the cheerleaders or whatever. And we charged like $200. And I spent about half of that money on albums and the other half of it on beer.
Nice.
And, we'd have beer in our car outside and go outside and drink, but they clamped down on all that.
Damn the police.
But it kind of started there. And then when I rolled into college, I ended up in a fraternity and we did a lot of live bands at our fraternity. And so I got involved with that pretty heavily with another guy named Jeff Quatnitz. And then, we worked on Armadillo Day, and then afterwards we started promoting shows in Chicago. Okay. And we promoted a bunch of shows for about a year and a half at places like the Riviera and the Park West and the Cabaret Metro. Mm-hmm. And that really is where I kind of started and learned how to buy bands and deal with contracts and promoting. And because we were promoting, we were literally selling tickets, and it was feast or famine. Right. So then when I got back here, that's kind of how I got. I already knew to a point some agents. I knew how to go about getting Buckwheat, Zydeco, and Gatemouth Brown, who are our first 2 headliners, if you will, at Saturday in the Park. And so that's how kind of how it evolved into that. And then after that we got going for like a year. I think we started in 91, and then 92 we booked the Neville Brothers, but around that same time we started doing shows at the Blue Cellar, which used to be in the basement of the Katy station. Oh, okay. And that was dormant at the time. They were calling it the Salt Cellar, and it was a room that they used for parties. It was like a party room. You could rent it for a wedding reception. And it wasn't the greatest room for that. It was a little ritzy. Most rooms in the KD station felt like there's a decent chance you could get murdered there. Even on the nicest day. I don't know about that, but it was
like a horror movie wouldn't look out of place.
They could have for sure filmed a horror movie in the KD station. But Damon Laurie and Vicky had that place, and we worked out a deal with them. I think in exchange for we kept the door and they ran the bar, and place held about 450. And we started doing shows down there. We did a band, the Table Rockers, were just a blues band out of Lincoln. It was this guy Larry Beamer that owned the Zoo Bar there at the time. Came over. I remember we paid him $600 and sold 200-300 tickets, and it worked out great. And people were like, no one's going to pay for a cover charge in Sioux City. And they were wrong.
Yeah.
And we started doing shows every 2 to 3 weeks. And so we were really doing a lot of that, along with Saturday in the Park. And then when the Orpheum opened in, what was it, 2003, 2001.
Oh, okay.
We jumped in and we did a lot of shows the first couple of years in the Orpheum.
Nice.
Kind of to prime the pump. We were involved in Dylan when he played there. We were involved heavily in Sheryl Crow, one of the 20 times she played there. We brought in Kev Mo early on. We're involved with Cosby. There were a few others.
Damn him for putting that asterisk there on your list of accomplishments.
Yeah. So we got into that stuff, and then got out as more traction got going for the Orpheum as well. And we did some other shows at some other clubs. We did shows in some other cities. At one point, we did like a mini run with Sheryl Crow, where we did a show with her here, Des Moines. She played Davenport, but we didn't have a piece of that. And then we jumped over to South Bend and Fort Wayne, Indiana, which was good. We done some shows and done some Johnny Lang dates, like in Quad Cities here, Sioux Falls, Fargo. Some other shows few shows up in Sioux Falls. Mannheim Steamroller was one of them. I'm trying to remember the other ones we've done. And a few shows in Omaha.
Nice. So every once in a while, when I have somebody who I feel like really can offer some advice on the show, I feel like there's a lot of younger people, maybe in their 20s, who could see themselves as like a concert promoter or somebody who follows a similar path. So if somebody was looking to do it today, because I know that the average kid's going to go how do I get a budget to pay these artists? How do I get in touch with the artists? What would the actual startup route be? Yeah.
So, I'm hesitant to bash on concert promoting, which I've been doing on and off for a long time.
It's usually pretty scummy industry.
Well, it's gambling. But only because if I would have asked somebody who'd been doing festivals for 10 years about Saturday in the Park, we would have never started it.
Yeah.
If we would ask somebody early on about the Orpheum, how to approach it, we would have never done it.
Yeah.
So you got to kind of cut your own path. The thing I will tell you is I can tell you right away, and there's been people that this has happened throughout the years after Saturday in the Park got rolling. If someone comes along and says, hey, I'm going to start this festival, I got this great t-shirt design or this great logo, and that's the first things out of their mouth, it's going to be a disaster.
Right.
We, even though we were pretty young, were pretty disciplined business-wise. We didn't know it, but we carved out this 5-page proposal, which I think is living over at the museum now. But we still use a not much different permutation. Deep Pollock at one point just put graphics on it. And cleaned it up for us. But basically, it was a pitch to go sell a marketing value.
Yeah.
And our premise always was, okay, we got to get the rights to the park, and we have to be able to sell beer.
Yeah.
And then if we can get that, then we have to go get some in-kind media sponsors. And in that case, we went and got Z98 and KTIV at the time. And they gave us a chunk of ads. And then we went and took that and parlayed that into sponsorship dollars in our case. And once we had the sponsorship dollars, then we went and booked Buckwheat, Zydeco, and Gatemouth Brown. And those guys we booked, 4 or 5 weeks out.
Yeah.
Because we wouldn't do it without the money. We needed to know we had a budget.
Nice.
And lined up beer and everything else. And it's a business.
Yeah.
And you have to deal with it like a business. You have to make a budget. I mean,
there's a million moving parts in this business, even more so than
and you
most.
can do it on a piece of notepad or whatever, but you have to do it. And it's the same with a concert, because you go do a concert at the Orpheum or any other venue. I've done shows out at Lewis and Clark Park and places like that. And you have to lay out what are your costs, because it's not just paying an artist $50 or $100,000 or $300,000 or whatever it is. But a lot of people say, oh, okay, let's see, the tickets were $75 and you sold probably 2,000 of them, and they always get the number wrong. So that's $150,000. So God, you must have made tons of money. And you have to look at it and say, how much was the artist?
Yeah.
But also how much was the venue? How much is insurance? How much is power? How much is marketing, which is a huge expense? How much is catering? Stage hands, generators, security, blah, 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 blah. And really add that up and figure out, does this work?
Yeah.
And how many people, and that's always the biggest challenge, is how many people will buy tickets at a given price.
Yeah.
We 20 years ago had this stupid tool that we invented that was, I thought, in the end, retroactively brilliant. And it was back when like it was dial up to send emails.
Yeah.
And we had an email list at the Orpheum of maybe 1,000, 1,500 people. And we would send out this text email. Mm-hmm. And it would say, it had this, this little ramble in front, but it would say, of the following 5 artists, please tell us how many tickets you would buy if they were coming. We'd always have some red herrings in there, make up some stuff, but we'd have a couple of ones we were really looking at the time. I remember one big one was Meatloaf at the time, and we did it with Sheryl Crow too. And we'd put like the projected ticket price. So you'd say Sheryl Crow, $50, and send it to this list of, 1,500, 2,000 people, and you'd be getting responses back in minutes.
Wow.
Like a minute or two.
Yeah.
And you go tally them and say, okay, we knew what our normal response rate was. If we sent out 1,500, we normally get 300 back, 400 back. And you don't really care if you get a represent. What you really care about is how many people like respond saying, I'd love to buy 4 tickets to Sheryl Crow.
Yeah.
And we'd add that up,
yep.
And that would tell us like what the interest was.
Mm-hmm. The golden age of email marketing.
Yeah, and there was nothing to it, and you could still get the same response today, but no one ever does it anymore. And I'll tell you, I booked Meatloaf into the Orpheum off of one of those deals because we had a massive response, and we charged like $75.
Yeah,
maybe 65, I don't know. And we paid him $75,000, which was pretty big at the time for the Orpheum.
Yeah.
And I had a couple other promoters like, what are you doing? Like, why are you paying him that much? Like, we're trying to get him for cheaper, and we keep hearing from the agent. You got a couple dates with him at 75, and that's an irresponsible number and all that. And I mean, I put those shows on sale. They all sold out in like 2 hours.
Wow.
So they could tell me all day long. I don't care because I would have been giving him that money anyway. One thing about concerts, by the way, is the bigger an artist is, the more they get paid. But in the end, people go to see the artist.
Yeah.
They would prefer maybe to see a show at the Orpheum over, some other less desirable venue, just a rundown place or whatever.
But I feel like the Orpheum sells better than the Sokol or whatever.
It could, yeah. But all that being said, it's got to be the right show. But venues don't sell tickets. A good venue and someone playing a great venue ads, but it in the end, Neil Young sells tickets. Yeah. Or Avett Brothers or whoever. So in the end, the deals with the artists are always a guarantee versus a percentage, meaning you might pay someone $50,000, but if you sell $200,000 for the tickets to that show, you're not just paying them $50,000. You're paying them $50,000 versus like 80% of the gross less the expenses. So in a case like that, and like when a show sells out, like with Meatloaf, maybe it grosses $120,000. We might have given Meatloaf $90,000 instead of $75,000 but we made plenty of money. The thing was like Meatloaf makes his money guaranteed to come here. Then we get to make some money. Then once we both made money, then we're sharing disproportionately towards the artist. Because in the end, Meatloaf's the guy that sold the tickets. I didn't sell the tickets.
He's the one who has an artist or is an artist and honed a craft. And I'm on board with that. I did do photo and video for a festival that'll go unnamed that I worked there for 2 days. And I want to say I was promised it was like a $2,200 or $2,500 job or something like that. And the festival claimed bankruptcy right after the artist. And I was like, that's really cool. It
happens.
I didn't want any money from this, So
it happens. It's more common, and I really believe that most people that go into that have good intentions. Yeah. And they really are doing it for the right reasons, but maybe they're a little irresponsible in the money part of it. Firefest, of course, now has become the quintessential cluster of festivals in that. I mean, I literally watched those 2 documentaries about Firefest, and it just makes me cringe because I've been in positions similar to that where, except for the fact that we've never had a position where we couldn't deliver. Yeah. Like we deliver the show. I mean, there were shows that we delivered that we knew we were losing $20,000 that night. And we always had a rule that we would show up no matter what. We always have money to pay the bands. Yeah. The bands are not going to play and not get paid. In
that documentary, did you watch the documentary? Yeah. Did they... Because I didn't watch the documentary, but I watched a vlogger that was actually working on the marketing team for Firefest, and he was completely in the dark about it. Like the marketing team that had no idea that the event wasn't happening. So the vlogger for months leading up was like, oh, we have a meeting with Ja Rule. We have a meeting about this Fire Festival. This is the crazy thing that's going to be happening. And then a lot of his footage is in that documentary because I know that it was the preamble to it. But did they say did they know 1 week out that it wasn't going to happen? Like, how did that happen?
They had people showing up.
That's crazy.
On their charter planes. They pulled the plug before it got too deep into it, but in part, people had nowhere to stay.
Yeah.
The guy kind of snapped that was running it, I think. He snapped and just didn't know what to do.
Yeah.
And he may have had some, deceptive or, listen, some people can take that leap of faith that it's all going to be okay.
Yeah.
There are definitely a lot of people out there that will do that. Oh, it's going to work out. But when it's one thing if you're in New York or Chicago where there's resources, right? Where you've got mass transit and you've got hotels, and in the end, a bunch of people might sue you or protest on their credit cards to get a refund. When you drag everybody to some island in the Bahamas that doesn't have the facilities or the resources,
becomes life or death.
You really got a problem, because they had like rain and they put up all these tents for people to live in that were supposed to be like luxury cabanas or whatever they were promised, and then it rained and everything got wet.
And then I want to say there was like 5 cabs on the island, like no.
Exactly. I mean, there was cars. It was a mess. And it was crazy. It was crazy. You're seeing the same thing a little bit right now with this Woodstock 50 or whatever they're calling it. Or I don't know what year it is, but they announced it. They had a lineup announced. Now they couldn't get permits for the venue. They're now trying to come up with a different venue. They're still trying to pull it off. It's supposed to be, I think, in like 3 or 4 months.
Damn.
It's probably going to go by the wayside. Certainly in upstate New York, there's still facilities. And obviously Woodstock, to begin with, was nothing short of a cluster in that they just threw up a show in the middle of a farm field in the middle of nowhere, and people just showed up. I mean, it could be the same as going 20 miles out of Sioux City and throwing up a stage and saying that the Stones are going to play there or something, and then you're just going to have a chaos.
Very similar to an unnamed festival that left me unpaid.
Yeah, right. But that being said, I mean, people can still get back in their cars and drive back to Sioux City or Omaha or Sioux Falls and get hotel rooms.
Right.
When you're on an island in the Bahamas, you can't do any of that.
The only
so it's
worst
all extra,
situation
is an extra bad situation.
If you say, like, was it Altamont Speedway or whatever,
where
it's the Rolling Stones, right? Dude got stabbed by Hell's Angels. Yeah. That's about the only worse option than a desert island.
And people could have gone back. People could get out of Altamont. It was a speedway. That place was made for, on an ongoing basis, attracting large crowds, and it was near a metropolitan area, which most venues are. I mean, very few people build venues in the middle of nowhere that are built to accommodate 50,000 people. Because you really have to look at that life safety stuff, not just in terms of the safety component of it, but also like, how do you feed people? How do you get them water?
Right.
Restrooms,
bathrooms,
basic. Where are they going to sleep? And that's a complication those guys ran into in the Bahamas, that they were just so ill-equipped that you see from the video. I mean, it's worth watching the video because you see how ill-prepared these guys are.
I'll have to check that out.
And they had a lot of production people to make sure the show was going to be produced properly, but they did not have the accommodation thing remotely dialed in. So
I actually heard from Travis Barker's perspective, because Blink-182 was like one of the first bands to sound the alarm, saying that they pulled out. And
we haven't been paid our deposit.
Yeah. And did you know that, because he was in that plane crash that killed DJ AM, and so Travis Barker doesn't go on planes anymore. So he was driving across the United States to get on a cruise ship out of like Florida, and then sail to the island, and like halfway through it was like, no, we're done with this, and he was like the canary in the coal mine for the whole thing, I guess.
I think so, and that comes out in the video. And it's good to see that we're really, and we always have been. We're very, very particular about we pay our deposits on time. I mean, we may miss, if the deposit's due on a weekend, we may pay it on Monday just because we forgot or whatever. But, if our deposits are due, like for Saturday in the Park, I mean, every band's been paid a deposit that, of the national touring folks that require that 30 days out, and there's no question. And we're emailing all them directly, like, how do you want to handle settlement? Are we going to do a wire? Are we going to do a company check? What works for you guys? Back a long time ago, it used to be cash. Today it's, there's no cash. Nobody even wants the cash.
Yeah, it makes sense.
They don't want to take the cash. They'll lose the cash. They want us more and more, Monday we wire balances.
Nice.
Yeah.
So I guess we can wrap things up here, unless you have anything else you wanted to add.
There's a lot.
Is there
it can go on and on.
So I got 2 things for you. Number one is is there anything that people need to make sure that they bring or know before we're going to Saturday in the Park this year?
Yeah, it's kind of the same drills it's been in the past. It's free. The single best thing you can do is drive to the Tyson Center and take a bus up there. The city does an amazing job with the busing. Getting up there super easy, and even the wait to get out of there at the end of the night. I mean, you might wait 10, 15 minutes to get on a bus. You're not going to wait that long. And there's no parking up around there, and there's tons of construction up around there, and people will literally drive around and spend a half hour between trying to find a place to park and walking over there and then going back when they can just go to the Tyson Center and take a bus.
Might as well.
No coolers, no pets. It's free, right? The sponsors, the sponsors and the volunteers, including our committee, keep that thing going. Mainly the committee is what keeps me involved because I love working with the committee. We got the best committee, and it's a working committee. And but we pay the bills in part by selling beer, selling food, selling drinks, pop and tea and water and Chesterman products, T-shirts and everything else. So we ask people, don't bring coolers. And don't bring pets. It's a lousy place. I love pets. I have a wonderful dog, Dolly, but I would not even think about taking Dolly up to that park during Saturday in the Park. Dolly might get lost, scared, spooked, whatever.
Poop on the ground.
There's a million reasons why not to. So we ask people not to do that. The other thing is this year we're adding and going to do a better job of denoting refillable water stations. We'll have a couple of them so people can bring their empty water bottles and fill them. They can buy a bottle of water that Chesterman's would supply and then refill it a couple times. I think that's just, looking at the overall, people's interest in what's going on. I mean, I use a refillable water bottle most of the time and when I don't go to an airport, I'll go to the Sioux City airport and buy a bottle at the airport, and I'll fill it up in Chicago a couple times, and it's all good. So we want to offer that. People got to stay hydrated. Super important. So that's good. We're going to have feature a couple of the local craft breweries there.
Awesome.
Jackson Street and Brew Sioux. Brew City. Yeah. And those guys have been great. They have a citrus day in the park.
Oh yeah,
that they made up. Yeah. They got a killer label for it that Jason did.
I believe it's an IPA, right, with Citra hops. So
yeah. Jason and Kelly Quinn work on the Jason Ryder and Kelly do that stuff. Jason does the labels, and Kelly's part of the brewing operation, and they also work on the Abe stage as well. So that's great, and the Abe stage this year is in memory of Pete Johnson as well. So, because Pete, in the end, I think Brandon Snow went to Pete, was friends with Pete, and or those guys went through Pete's folks who have worked on the festival forever, and that's how that got going.
Oh, great.
The Abe.
Okay.
Because it was dormant for a couple of years.
Yeah.
And that's really how it came back. So we'll have, those. Marto just opened, and so we didn't quite make that connection. But that would, it's great to have the local craft beers up there. Yeah, absolutely. So that'll be a nice addition. I'm just trying to think if there's any other new twists. I don't really think so.
Well, then my last question to you is, what do you think is the most slept on thing in Sioux City? So it's like something that exists in Sioux City that you think that everybody should know about that you love.
Oh, slept on that way.
Yeah.
Man, that's a tough one. I wish I had more time to ponder that.
Oh, okay. So I can do mine first.
Yeah. Okay.
All right. So my most slept on thing in Sioux City is, oh my gosh, and I'm like 20 some episodes deep in this, so I'm really digging at the bottom of my barrel now at this point. But I think that my most slept on thing in Sioux City is the Bacon Creek Trail, because if you have a dog, and they got the walking or the dog park out there at Bacon Creek, which is all right if you want your dog to get in a fight, but I think it's like the perfect circumference to walk around for like one dog walk. And the nature is great the whole way, and it's paved. So I think that that's about as good of a place to walk a dog in Sioux City as you're going to get. So
yeah, I now that you mentioned that, I'm a big fan of the dog park. My dog's a little bigger, so I got
I got a Doberman myself.
Lucky that way. But I love the dog park. I'll tell you, like along that same vein, the Rose Garden.
Oh, okay.
Not to kind of take a easy one there. But the Rose Garden behind Grandview Park, especially on a random day, is amazing. And to look at that and say, you know, this is something the city owns and maintains.
Yeah.
And they have gardeners that maintain that and do a wonderful job of it, is really cool. And there's times of the year, you know, different times, but that it's in full bloom.
Yeah.
And it's amazing.
Right.
So the Rose Garden's super cool. The other one is War Eagle.
Okay.
I've been up there in the last couple weeks, and War Eagle's awesome. Really awesome, especially if you go up there later. You know, or at a time when there's not a lot of people up there.
Yeah.
Including there's some spots up there. First of all, the statue is super cool. And then secondly, there's some spots kind of around the fences that you can kind of get through where the view is amazing.
Yeah.
And you can sit up there and look at the, you know, whereas the Big Sioux flows into the Missouri, and it's a pretty peaceful place and a great place. And it's a place that every time I go up there, I see people up there, but it's not a heavily used place.
No, not at all.
Which is great. So it's a really good kind of meditative place as well.
Sunrises and sunsets there are pretty beautiful.
Yeah,
It's got the nice light on the statue, and then, yeah.
Absolutely. And you're kind of sitting there in a spot where you're looking over that river valley, and a river valley that you can kind of see maybe how it was even 200 years ago before it was channelized and open all the way across to Nebraska to the bluffs over there. And you can get an idea of maybe what those guys saw when they were settling Sioux City, and you know, in a much wilder time, or you know, less structured time, I should say.
Yeah,
where Sioux City was smaller and the steamboats were running up. But it's cool. It's a pretty inspiring place.
Love
and
it.
you can see on a decent, you know, seeing like Port Neal is nothing up there. I mean, you can see way, way, way to the south, and just way, you know, across Port Neal and across to Winnebago, and even beyond those places. I mean, those places might be 20, 25 miles, and you probably see 30 miles, 40 miles.
My eyes aren't very good, and I can see Jefferson with no problem up there, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. And it's cool. So I'll go with that.
I like it.
To back that up.
Great answers. All right.
And not give away my incredibly childish taste in food and all the junk food that I eat all the time that I shouldn't, that I can pick off about 10 places in Sioux City. So
I love it. Well, I appreciate that. That was as an original
Tasty
one.
In-N-Out onion chips would be the other one.
There we go. Don't be wasting too many of my good slept-ons here.
Yep.
So with that, I'm sorry, July
6th.
July 6th?
Yep.
July 6th is Saturday in the Park, and it is going to be a killer one this year. There's a little something for everybody. And if you like this show, go ahead and like, subscribe, tell your friends about it, all those good things on social media. I really appreciate all those things. And make sure to come out to Saturday in the Park. For Sioux City Show, I'm Taylor Grote. Thanks so much.
Thank you.